3 days from now, a fire crew will pull 41 bodies out of the wreckage of Sector 9 and nobody, not the coroner, not the insurance adjusters, not the syndicate accountants tallying their losses, will be able to agree on what actually happened there. The official report will call it a catastrophic structural failure. The unofficial one, the one traded in whispers across every mercenary exchange from New Denver to the Kepler yards, will call it something else. The night the ghost came home. But that's later. Right now, none of that has happened yet. Right now, there's just a woman in a rented trench coat, standing in a hallway that smells like ozone and gun oil, about to make the worst financial decision of her life, and the best decision of what's left of it. The neon signs of the New Denver Mercenary Exchange buzzed with a harsh, unforgiving flicker, throwing long bruise-colored shadows across the damp, pitted concrete. Mara Calloway pulled her coat tighter, telling herself the shiver running through her had nothing to do with the busted atmospheric regulators overhead. She was 29 years old, a third-generation commodities trader, and she was carrying a briefcase that held the entire future of her family's business, the deed to the Kessler Ridge iridium claim, the last asset her grandmother hadn't already lost to bad debt and worse partners. Tomorrow morning she had a meeting with Titus Vale. Everyone in the trade districts knew the name. Vale Conglomerate didn't buy companies, it harvested them, and the people who ran those companies had an unfortunate habit of turning up in unmarked graves shortly after signing away everything they owned. Mara needed protection walking into that room. What she didn't have was money. The exchange floor was a bazaar of violence dressed up as commerce. Holographic displays rotated through rosters of armored contractors. Kinetic shielded giants, augmented snipers with slit cybernetic eyes, entire tactical squads whose retainer alone could have bought Mara's apartment building. Her budget wouldn't cover the ammunition for one of them. She found the front desk, where a clerk named Otto Renner was thumbing through a data slate without much interest in his job. "I need a bodyguard," Mara said, sliding her credit chip across the counter. 3-day contract. High risk. Corporate negotiation. Otto glanced at the balance and laughed, a short, dry, unkind sound. "Miss Calloway, this might get you a security drone with a busted targeting array. It will not get you a bodyguard." "There has to be someone," she said, knuckles widening on the counter's edge. "Bottom tier. Whatever's left. I just need a body that can stand behind me and look dangerous." Otto sighed and pulled up the lowest roster, the washouts, the disgraced, the desperate. He scrolled past all of them, all the way to the bottom, where a single file blinked in dull amber. "Oh, this one's a treat," Otto said, savoring it. Corwin Ashgrove, 58. Shattered femur. Shrapnel scarring across both legs. Documented insubordination. Chronic limp that shows up on every physical they've ever run on him. He's been sitting in the holding pen for 3 months. Nobody wants him. How much? Otto quoted a number that was exactly 10 credits under everything Mara had left in the world. "You'd honestly do better buying a cheap blaster and shooting Vale yourself," he added, not unkindly. "Ashgrove's a ghost. A liability with a pulse. I'll take him." 10 minutes later, Mara watched a man walk through the blast doors of the holding sector, and her stomach dropped. He did not look like a bodyguard. He looked like a man who had survived a building collapse only to be run over by the ambulance that came to save him. Faded canvas jacket, plain gray shirt, boots scuffed down to bare metal at the toes. Cropped gray hair. A jagged pale scar running the length of his jaw. He walked with a heavy list to the left, favoring one leg with every step. It was his eyes that made her pause. Pale, washed-out blue. Not angry. Not afraid. Not anything at all. Like looking into a sky with nothing behind it. "You're Calloway," he said. It wasn't a question. His voice was low and gravel-rough. "I am." She offered a hand. He didn't take it. He looked at the briefcase, then at the exit, like he was already cataloging sightlines. 3 days. No offensive ops. I stand where you tell me. I watch the doors. I keep you breathing. That's the whole contract. Yes, Mara said, feeling the full weight of what she'd just done settle into her chest. What have I gotten myself into? We have a meeting with Titus Vale tomorrow. The Crimson Ridge Hotel. It's going to be Vale. Something moved behind those flat eyes, there and gone so fast she almost missed it. He said nothing else. He pulled a crumpled pack of cigarettes from his jacket, lit one with a battered brass lighter, and exhaled toward the ceiling vents. Let's go. Wasting daylight. As they crossed the exchange floor, a massive augmented enforcer named Draven Marsh. Vale's personal muscle, on loan to intimidate the small-timers, spat near Corwin's feet. Careful, old man, Marsh sneered. Don't break a hip before you cash the check. Corwin didn't stop walking. Didn't turn his head. Mara hurried to keep pace, heart hammering, wondering if she just spent the last of her family's money on a corpse that hadn't finished dying yet. The transport hummed over the cracked New Denver arterials, the sky outside the color of an old bruise. Corwin sat with his eyes closed the whole ride, seemingly asleep. He hadn't asked for a floor plan. Hadn't requested a threat assessment. Hadn't so much as glanced at a weapon. You're not carrying, Mara said, unable to help herself. Guns make people nervous, Corwin murmured without opening his eyes. I try not to make people nervous until it's necessary. They reached the Crimson Ridge, black glass, cold steel, 40 floors of old money pretending to be new money. Titus Vale was already seated when they entered the private suite, flanked by 4 armored contractors. The lead one was Draven Marsh, cybernetic eye glowing a faint, lazy crimson. Vale didn't stand. Miss Calloway. Sit. Let's not waste each other's time. I'm offering 20% of market value for the claim. Sign, and you walk out of here breathing. The claim is worth 10 times that, Mara said, forcing steel into her voice. My family has held that charter for 3 generations. I'm not signing for pennies. Vale's gaze slid to Corwin, standing quiet against the wall, apparently absorbed by a potted synthetic fern. This is your muscle? Vale laughed. Marsh, look at this. She brought a corpse to a negotiation. Marsh grinned. Want me to put him through the window, boss? Not yet. Vale's civility evaporated. Miss Calloway. You are in my city, breathing my air. You will sign, or Marsh is going to arrange a very tragic accident for you on the way back to the spaceport. I need time, Mara said, grabbing her briefcase, already looking for the door. You don't get time. Vale nodded to Marsh. Take the case. Break her arms if she resists. Marsh stepped forward, a mountain of chrome and muscle. Excuse me, a quiet, gravel voice said. Every head in the room turned. Corwin hadn't moved from the wall. But his pale eyes were locked on Marsh now, and something in them had changed entirely. The lady's leaving, Corwin said. You're going to let her walk out that door. Vale burst out laughing. Marsh rolled his massive shoulders. Old man, I'm going to snap your neck like a dry twig. Marsh lunged, impossibly fast for a man his size, servos whining, a fist swinging in a killing arc. Corwin didn't retreat. He stepped inside the arc, bad leg planting with sudden, terrifying stability, and drove the heel of his palm into the nerve cluster beneath Marsh's augmented elbow. Metal cracked. Marsh's arm went dead. Corwin pivoted, using the giant's own momentum, swept his legs, and slammed 300 pounds of augmented enforcer face first through the obsidian conference table. It shattered. Marsh did not get up. 1.4 seconds. Mara would find out later that was the exact time, because someone had been recording. The second guard raised a plasma rifle. Corwin snatched a glass decanter off the ruined table and threw it hard enough to break bone. The third drew a sidearm. Corwin closed the distance, twisted the weapon out of his grip until it discharged into the ceiling, and drove a knee into his ribs. The fourth guard dropped his gun and put his hands up, eyes wide with animal terror. The limp was gone. In its place was something fluid and predatory, and Corwin's breathing hadn't changed at all. He looked down at Vale, who had gone the color of old paper. "The lady's keeping her claim," Corwin said softly. He took Mara's elbow. "Come on, kid. Meeting's over." They didn't go back to the hotel. Corwin had the driver drop them in the industrial sector, a maze of rusted refineries, and led Mara down into a storm bunker that smelled of mildew and old copper. "Sit," he said, tossing her a thermoflask. "Don't touch the local network. Vale owns the infrastructure here. He'll trace your signal." "You told the exchange you were disabled," Mara said, finding her voice again. "You told me no offensive capability. I am disabled. Knee flares up when it rains." He was already digging a canvas duffel out from under a loose floor panel. "And I didn't run an offensive op. I defended my client. It's in the contract. Don't play games with me." Mara's fear was curdling into something sharper. Those were syndicate-trained contractors. Marsh has killed people in bar fights and walked away clean. You dropped him in under 2 seconds. "Who are you?" Corwin didn't answer. He was pulling gear from the bag: kinetic rifles, breaching charges, a combat knife, a matte black tactical rig that looked worn soft with use and impeccably maintained. Mara pulled out her hardline satellite terminal. No open network, but a direct uplink to Priya Anand, an old university friend who now did classified systems research for a living and owed Mara several favors. Priya. Deep background check. Name: Corwin Ashgrove. Mercenary ID 84A. Dig past anything public. The reply took 11 minutes and arrived wrapped in red warning banners. Mara, where the hell are you? The public profile is a fabrication, a burn identity stamped by Coalition Central. I had to route through 3 black site mirrors to find anything real. His name isn't Ashgrove. It's Elias Cade. Rank: Commander. Mara frowned at the screen. Commander of what? The file finished decrypting. 70% of it was redacted in heavy black ink, but what remained painted a picture that turned her blood to ice water. Read the deployment history, Priya had written. This is the Kepler ghost. 20 years ago, during the Meridian blockade, 3 coalition battalions got pinned on a dead moon. Central sent in 1 Wraith Division operative to break the siege alone. 40 days behind enemy lines. He dismantled their command structure, sabotaged planetary defenses, and killed their general with a knife. They called him the Reaper of Sector 4. Officially discharged 10 years ago, PTSD, physical trauma. Then he disappeared. Mara looked up slowly from the terminal to the tired old man across the bunker, calmly loading armor-piercing rounds into a heavy pistol. "You're the Reaper," she whispered. Corwin's hands stopped. The click of the magazine seating echoed too loudly in the small room. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Priya's good," he said, without looking up. "Most hackers trip the kill switch before they get that deep." "Why?" Mara's voice cracked. "Why is a legend sitting in a bargain bin letting thugs spit on him for 50 credits a day?" Corwin finally met her eyes. The emptiness had shifted into something heavier, the weight, Mara thought, of 1,000 men who weren't in the room anymore but never quite left either. "Because when you spend 30 years being a weapon," he said, "you forget how to be a person. They built me to kill quietly. When I got too broken to do it quietly anymore, they threw me away. I came here to disappear. The mercenary gig paid for cheap whiskey and a place to sleep. I took the bottom-tier contracts because nobody expects anything from the guy with the limp. He stood, slinging the tactical rig over his shoulder, and the transformation was staggering. He no longer looked like an old man. He looked carved out of shadow and old steel. But Vale made a mistake today, he said, racking the slide of a rifle. He reminded me what bullies look like. I've always hated bullies. That was when the drop ship started landing. Vale's voice tore across every open frequency in the sector, unencrypted, not caring who heard. Miss Calloway. I don't know what kind of freak you brought into my city, but you humiliated me in front of my own men. I have 50 contractors establishing a perimeter around the industrial sector. Thermal imaging, full spectrum. We know exactly where you are. I am going to burn this entire block to ash just to hear you scream. Mara's stomach dropped through the floor. 50 men, Corwin. We can't fight 50 men. Corwin walked toward the ladder, stopped, and looked back over his shoulder. The dead-eyed stare was gone entirely, replaced by something bright and terrible. You're right, he said. You can't. He pulled the brass lighter from his pocket, flipped it open, lit another cigarette, and smiled. A dark, dangerous thing at the corner of his scarred jaw. I'm going to earn my 50 credits. The hatch sealed above her with a ringing clang. Alone in the amber emergency light, Mara did the only thing she knew how to do. She went to work. Her fingers flew across the holographic keys, cracking the municipal surveillance grid and piggybacking onto Vale's open comm channels. 12 camera feeds bloomed to life across her screen. 50 armored contractors moved through the rusted labyrinth of distillation towers and catwalks with disciplined, veteran cohesion. Acidic rain hissed against the metal, folding the whole sector into gray fog. At the center of the formation, beneath the skeletal legs of a cooling tower, sat a heavily armored mobile command vehicle. Vale was inside it. Spread out, crackled the voice of Vale's field commander, a scarred veteran named Rourke. Thermal shows residual heat near Sector 4. Flush the old man out. Mr. Vale wants him alive, he wants to make an example. Mara searched frame after frame, dreading the moment she'd see Corwin's body dragged into the light. The street was empty. Then the power in Sector 4 died. Not a flicker, a full cascading grid failure, 3 blocks swallowed whole into darkness. Report. Who cut the power? We didn't touch the grid, sir, main breaker's been manually destroyed. Switching to night vision. Greenlit visors flared to life across the feeds. A 6-man squad swept a narrow alley between pressurized chemical tanks, rifles tracing careful arcs. High above, unseen in the fog, a shadow shifted on a rusted crossbeam. Corwin didn't use a rifle, the muzzle flash would have given him away. He simply dropped a fragmentation grenade straight down into the center of the formation. Clank. The explosion tore the alley apart and turned Mara's camera feed to static. She didn't need to see it to understand. Contact. Contact, Sector 4. All units converge, suppressive fire. Plasma bolts tore blindly through the fog, melting scaffolding, setting debris alight. They were shooting at nothing. Corwin was already 3 streets away. A 4-man flanking squad moved through the wreckage in diamond formation. The man at the rear vanished without a sound, just the quiet drag of a body into an open storm drain. Where's Miller? The squad leader hissed, turning, and a suppressed kinetic round punched cleanly through his visor. He dropped. The last 2 panicked, firing wildly into shadow. Corwin came out of the fog like something the dark had shaped on purpose, slid under their line of fire, drove a blade up through the unarmored joint beneath one man's arm, seized the falling body's carbine, pivoted, and put a burst through the last man's chest plate. 4 seconds. 4 dead. Corwin's pulse, if anyone had been close enough to check, hadn't moved. What is happening out there? Vale screamed over the comm, you have 50 men. Find him and kill him. He's wrapped himself in thermal dampening, sir, Rourke shouted back, composure fraying. We've lost 12. He's bleeding our flanks and we can't find a pattern. There was no pattern. That was the point. Mara watched, hollowed out with awe and horror, as Corwin turned a 50-man force into a slow-motion massacre. He didn't just kill efficiently, he made it hurt to be near the dead. He rigged proximity charges to fallen bodies so the men who rushed to check on their friends died with them. He ruptured a high-pressure steam line just as a squad crossed beneath it, scalding and blinding them before picking them off one by one. 20 minutes in, Rourke pulled his last 20 men into a tight ring around the command vehicle, kinetic barriers overlapping, weapons aimed outward into the fog. Hold the line, Rourke ordered, voice trembling now. He can't take us all head-on. Hold the perimeter. Silence fell. Rain hammered the armor plating. Then, out of the fog, Corwin walked into the vehicle's floodlights, not hiding anymore. Soaked jacket, hair plastered flat, a rifle slung low. He looked exhausted. He looked old. His eyes were burning. Fire. Kill him, kill him. 20 barrels swung toward him. Before a single trigger could close, Corwin raised his left hand and pressed a detonator. He hadn't only been hunting men through the fog. He'd been wiring the structural legs of the distillation tower looming directly over the command vehicle. The charges went off in perfect sequence. Steel legs the width of tree trunks buckled with a groan like something dying, and thousands of tons of tower came down on the defensive perimeter in a single collapsing wave. The shockwave rattled dust loose from the bunker ceiling 3 blocks away. When the dust settled, the ring of defenders was gone, crushed under twisted girders, or scattered and moaning in the rubble. The command vehicle's rear axle had been crushed flat, its reinforced door dented and jammed in its frame. Through smoke and rain, Corwin walked forward. His limp was pronounced now, leg dragging through the debris, but his pace never slowed. He was walking for Vale. Inside the command vehicle, emergency lights strobed red across a cramped cabin. Titus Vale was on the floor, bleeding from a gash where he'd been thrown against a console, scrambling backward from a door that was groaning under repeated impact. Clang. I have money. Vale screamed at the door, drawing a jeweled holdout blaster with hands too unsteady to aim it. I'll double whatever she's paying you. I'll buy you a planet, just name your price. Crack. A breaching charge blew the locking mechanism clean out of its housing. The door tore off its hinges. Corwin stepped inside, face streaked with soot and someone else's blood, and looked at Vale the way a man looks at something he's about to step on. Vale fired wildly. The bolt scorched the doorframe an inch from Corwin's skull. He didn't blink. He slapped the blaster from Vale's hand, hauled him up by the throat of his ruined suit, and slammed him against the bulkhead. Please, Vale wheezed, legs kicking uselessly. Who are you? I'm the consequence of your arrogance, Corwin said quietly. And then something happened that Mara, watching through the vehicle's one surviving interior camera, hadn't expected, and neither, judging by the sudden change in his voice, had Corwin. Vale's terrified eyes fixed on the scar running down Corwin's jaw, and something like recognition broke through the panic. Wait, he rasped. Wait, Cade. Elias Cade. You were on the Meridian Relief Manifest. I sold that manifest. I sold the extraction codes to the blockade command 20 years ago. I didn't know. His voice cracked into something close to hysterical laughter. You're supposed to be dead. Everyone on that moon was supposed to be dead. That's what I was paid to make happen. For one long moment, Corwin's grip didn't move, and neither did his face, but something behind those pale eyes finally, fully woke up. Not just a soldier's cold competence. Recognition. 20 years of not knowing why his battalions had been abandoned on a dead rock, and here, by pure accident, was the answer, gasping for air in his fist. You, Corwin said, very softly, sold the codes. It was business, Vale choked out. It was just business, the coalition never proved. Corwin didn't kill him. That was, Mara would think later, the most frightening thing of all. That he had every reason to, right there, and instead he let him drop to the floor and simply stood over him, pistol trained on the bridge of his nose, breathing slow, and even while 2 decades of an unanswered question settled into something like peace. You're going to wish I killed you tonight, Corwin said. Instead you're going to live long enough to watch everything you built get taken apart, piece by piece, the same way you took my people apart. Starting now. He pulled the folded contract from his coat, the deed Vale had tried to steal, and pressed it flat against the bulkhead by Vale's head. Clause 1. Vale Conglomerate and all subsidiaries permanently forfeit any claim on the Kessler Ridge Iridium Charter, effective immediately. Vale nodded frantically. Clause 2. 50 million credits, transferred to Mara Calloway's corporate account tonight, as a penalty for breach of etiquette. 50 million. That's a quarter of my liquid capital, you can't possibly. Corwin cocked the hammer. The click filled the whole cabin. I can. Sign it. Vale signed. He authorized the transfer with shaking hands, biometric confirmation blinking green on his wrist terminal, tears cutting clean tracks through the soot on his face. It's done, he whispered. It's done. Please. Just let me live. Corwin checked the signature. Checked his own wrist monitor for the transfer confirmation. Folded the contract with the same unhurried precision he'd used to load his rifle 2 hours earlier, and tucked it back into his coat. If you ever come near Mara Calloway again, he said, leaning down until his voice was the only thing in Vale's world, if you ever say her name, there won't be a bunker deep enough or an army large enough to keep me from finding you. And Vale, one more thing. Every operative who died on that moon had a name. I'm going to make sure the coalition gets yours, and every record you tried to bury with mine. He turned his back on the industrial baron he'd broken and walked out into the rain. By the time Mara found the courage to climb out of the bunker, the rain had stopped and the sky was lightening into the pale, sickly glow of a new Denver dawn. She walked through the ruins in silence, hand over her mouth, unable to process the scale of what had happened around her while she hid underground. She found Corwin sitting on a metal crate at the edge of the collapse, smoking, legs stretched out in front of him, looking utterly spent. You're bleeding, she said, running to him. Not mine, kid. He held out the folded contract. It's done. He signed over every claim. 50 million's already sitting in your account. Your family's safe. Mara took the paper with shaking hands, tears finally breaking loose. You saved my life. My family's whole legacy. How do I even begin to repay that? I can give you half the money, you'd never have to work again. Corwin took a long pull on his cigarette and let the smoke drift up toward the clearing sky. For the first time since she'd met him, something like a real smile touched the corner of his scarred mouth. Don't need millions, kid. Money just complicates things. I like the quiet. He rose slowly, wincing as weight settled onto the bad leg, and brushed the ruin of his jacket off with what dignity he had left. You owe me 50 credits for the day rate. And a ride back to the exchange. I left my good lighter in my locker. Mara stared at him. A man who had just dismantled 50 armed men and brought an industrial empire to its knees, standing in the wreckage asking for 50 credits like it was any other Tuesday. But she understood, looking at him now. He didn't do it for money. He never had. Underneath 20 years of being turned into a weapon and thrown away when he broke, there was still something in him that hadn't been ground down, some stubborn, unkillable core of decency that a betrayal, a war, and a decade of being nobody had never quite managed to erase. 50 credits, she said, voice thick, and pressed the chip into his hand. You've got it, Commander. He paused at the title. looked at the chip, looked back at her, and for just a fraction of a second the crushing weight behind his eyes seemed to lift. "Just Corwin," he said quietly. He turned and limped away into the pale morning light, a battered, broken man in a cheap canvas coat, uneven footsteps echoing off wet pavement. But behind him lay the wreckage of an empire, and ahead of him, whispered already through every mercenary channel from New Denver to the Kepler yards, a legend was being born all over again. He was a reminder. To Mara, and soon to a galaxy that would trade the story like currency, that humanity's greatest weapon was never its technology or its wealth. It was the unbreakable, indomitable refusal of certain people to stay down.